Hi, my name is Irene Paula Gallegos Ibarra, and I am a PhD student on the Program of Languages and Cultures of the University of Córdoba in Spain, and I'm here to present the results that I got on my research about the COVID-19 pandemic's impact on English teaching, along with my director, Cristina Huertas Abril. This is the table of contents that we're going to be following in this presentation, so that we first start by talking about a brief introduction to the topic, for which we have to go back to spring 2020 when the lockdown started. It affected 40% of the global population who were not able to work in a face-to-face way, so they started working from home. And that also affected to many teachers and the educational sector. We saw an accelerating process of the digital transformation of education that was already happening, and it affected different elements such as curricular elements, the social interaction between students and their teachers, the teaching English as a foreign language subject as something that can be also hard for students, and it was even harder now that they were working from home, and also emergency remote language teaching as a methodology that gained popularity during the COVID-19 lockdown. For the theoretical background, we chose to analyze different language learning methodologies such as the audiolingual method or the grammar translation method and the content language integrated learning approach. However, the most popular one during the lockdown was emergency remote language teaching, since it was the only one focused on emergency situations and how technology can help both teachers and students to stay in touch to continue learning and teaching through these difficult situations. Foreign language during the pandemic changed when it comes to the contents that were being taught, the materials used, the evaluation and assessment tools and methods, and also the role of the families. When it comes to the contents, teachers had to change the way in which they were teaching the already existing content, but also some other teachers included information about the COVID-19 pandemic, since they saw that most of the information that was given to in social media or on TV was oriented towards adults, and it was difficult for younger learners to understand what was going on. Then when it comes to the materials, teachers had to create new materials so that they were online, or they had to adapt the already existing materials that were in physical format to an online format. Also, they talk about how it was important for younger learners to have more materials, since it was harder for them to learn without these manipulative tools, and therefore they had to create more materials for the younger learners. When it comes to evaluation and assessment, teachers use different methods and tools, but they saw that students were getting different results when they were working online. They also chose to use a problem-solving type of methodology rather than using methodologies based on memorization and learning things by heart, since they thought that students were going to benefit more from a more practical approach. They also used a triangular assessment in order to be more fair, considering that the last term of the year was the one with the lockdown, and therefore it was harder for them to get good grades. And they also had to contemplate external factors that were obstacles for the learning, such as the lack of materials, access to the internet, or the lack of the support from the teachers. When it comes to the role of the families, it changed during the lockdown, since they were the only social agents for socialization of the students. They sometimes struggled to work with their pupils, with their children, because they did not have enough time or resources. But they also got help from different organizations, and the families that did not have a laptop or computer or internet access were giving it by the organizations. Then they had to implement different learning strategies according to their children's needs, and they had other concerns, such as the fact that some parents were losing their jobs because of the COVID-19 lockdown, and also they had to make ends meet by the end of the months. Then for the hypothesis of this research, we have 5 hypotheses that state that teaching English as a foreign language in primary education has been negatively affected by the lockdown, that new materials were created to teach and learn English from home, that the ICTs have played a major role during the pandemic when teaching English as a foreign language, that teachers have experienced difficulties to coordinate with each other during the lockdown, that the role of families had an impact on students' learning of the second language. Therefore, the objectives of this research are structured so that we have a general objective that says that we have to determine to which extent teaching English as a foreign language has changed because of the pandemic according to teachers' perceptions. And according to that, we have established different variables that are also part of the different specific objectives of the research. The first specific objective says that we have to know how teachers adapted their methodology to teach English during the pandemic. Then, Then the second objective says that we have to analyze how the ICTs were used during and after the lockdown to teach English as a foreign language to compare them. The third specific objective says that we have to determine teachers' opinions on teaching tools and materials that emerged during the lockdown. Specific objective 4 says that we have to explore how foreign language teachers coordinated with each other. Specific objective 5 says that we have to know how teachers perceive the comeback to schools in September of 2020. And a specific objective 6 says that we have to analyze teachers' perceptions on the changes of their relationship with families. The methodology has different variables that we have to consider. The first of all of them is participants. There were 11 teachers who were both male and female that had different working experience and that work in different types of schools during and after the lockdown, teaching English as a foreign language in primary education. We can see that some of them had different types of groups and that some of them worked in different schools during and after the lockdown. The instrument that was used to interview these teachers was semi-structured interviews so that they could give their perspectives in an extensive way. So the procedure was first to select the teachers, that they had to be teachers that were teaching English as a foreign language in primary education in Córdoba during and after the lockdown. And then we had to arrange the meeting, which was at a time and place that was suitable for them. The place was online, so we had to choose a platform that was mainly Skype, but we also used WhatsApp. Then we asked them demographic questions like where are you working at the moment, where did you work during the COVID-19 pandemic, or how long have you been teaching. Then we asked questions about how they were teaching during the lockdown, such as what materials did you use and which were the most difficult parts of your job during that time. And then some questions about the post-lockdown period, such as how was the teaching when you went back to the regular lessons in the face-to-face classroom. And then we had to analyze all of those information and responses, and that led to using the grounded theory, among others, so that we could classify all the responses into different categories that were general and that could group the different responses that were similar. So the main categories when it comes to time, it was during and after the lockdown, but we also got information on the sessions, the relationship with the families, the materials that were used, teacher coordination, assessment, problems that they had to face, the comeback to regular classes in September of 2020, the lockdown discoveries such as websites and apps that they like, and then some facts that explain the difficulties that they have to go through. We also did a semantic analysis based on the word lockdown and analyzing it in different responses and different contexts, explaining different ideas. When the content analysis, we took into consideration those categories and the number of references that could be included into those categories in both number and percentage form. And that led to the results. So when it comes to the session, teachers said that they had to adapt to the ERLT method, considering that they have to work on almost 23 hours a day. They had to use the ICTs, for example, as in blogs, that they use the applications from Google, that they sometimes try to use video calls, but they could not. Also that they had to pay attention to diversity, involve students in this method, which was easier for the older students, and also that they had to develop the 4 skills of the English language: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. When it comes to the materials that they were using, they said that they had to adapt them to the ERLT method, giving clear instructions through a Word document, for example. Then the resources that we're using were, for example, applications like Live Worksheet, which is a way to use worksheets in an online format. But they also had to face some constraints, such as students not having access to the digital book. Then when it comes to teacher coordination, they talked about how it was during the lockdown, which was very good, how they did more online meetings than they used to, the benefits that it was basically that they worked in a more coordinated and organic way, and some of the difficulties that they had to face, and it was that not all teachers worked in the same way and in the same rhythm. When it comes to the assessments, teachers said that the type of assessment was different, so they had to choose a task that they wanted to assess to give students a mark. And then when it comes to the results, they saw that they were better when they were working from home. When it comes to the families, we can state that the families were very involved. The communication was good with the teachers. There were some difficulties, such as the fact that most of them did not know English, and they had to use the ICT resources, so they used messages on the phone to talk. But they also said that they did not have privacy of the personal information because they have to give them their personal contact number. Regarding some of the general problems that they had to face, we have technical problems such as the fact that Moodle, which was the app that they used in Andalusia for online meetings, did not work when too many people were connected. Also that it had a negative impact, the lockdown had a negative impact, such as the fact that if some people used blogs, the people who did not use blogs were excluded. Then a negative impact on teaching English as a foreign language, because some teachers used drama activities in the class and now they could not do it because they were working in the distance. And they also remarked the importance of face-to-face lessons, since they said that technology can help teach, but they cannot substitute the contact that teachers and students have on a regular basis. Then for the comeback to regular classes, teachers said that at the beginning of the year, they saw that students were having worse results than when they let them go home at the beginning of the lockdown. Then they have different opinions, such as, for example, considering that when they work from home, they don't study the same way as they do in school. That the school management sometimes was not the best because some directors were not taking it seriously. The organization of the teachers was sometimes good because they had some teacher training. The difficulties that they had to face was that students were fighting more often after the lockdown. Then the methodology that they were using was mostly transversal, so that they worked through different subjects at the same time to assimilate contents better on the side of students. And then materials were created, but instead of forgetting about the things that they learned during the lockdown, they still used the Google Classroom to talk about homework that students had to do. For the discoveries, teachers discovered some digital resources that were useful, such as Google Classroom, and the implications of these tools in teaching English as a foreign language, such as, for example, the fact that they could use other tools to assess pupils' performance rather than using just tests. For the general facts, they said that the lockdown had positive consequences, such as the fact that students with no means were given the means that they needed. Negative consequences, such as many difficulties when it comes to family and working too much from home on the side of teachers. The lack of resources and training for some teachers and students, and the adaptation to the context, which was difficult from home, in specifically difficult contexts or schools where students do not have enough resources or are more conflicted. The discussion of the results leads to talking about these different categories in depth, such as the fact that the sessions were easier to carry out with older students because they were more autonomous. Most students did have poor internet connection, and there was lots of absenteeism because of that. And they were restricted when it comes to planning activities, when it comes to teachers. Then the materials that they used were varied, but they had lack of materials that they would like to use because of being online. When it comes to assessment and teacher coordination, Spanish teachers did receive some guidelines, which was different from what we saw on the literature review. However, the results from students also were not worse than they were prior to the COVID lockdown, and the teacher coordination was very good online because teachers communicated more often and they worked quite good together. For the families, we can say that they cannot always help because they either don't know how to use the ICT tools or they don't know English. There are some general problems, such as the fact that they had to adapt to the new system very quickly and that they sometimes cannot access necessary resources. Moreover, we have to deal with the lack of motivation that comes with online lessons with the students, and that when we come back to regular lessons in the face-to-face teaching, most teachers agree that it is better. When it comes to the lockdown discoveries, teachers says that there are lots of useful means that could be used in the face-to-face lessons as well, and also that are useful to be prepared for a future pandemic in case it happens again. They also said that the social interaction changes after the lockdown because the students had been not in touch with other pupils for a long time. The conclusions that we get to is that there are some changes in teaching English as a foreign language that lead to different difficulties, but also new opportunities to use the ICTs in the classroom and more teacher coordination. All the curricular elements were affected, and there were some limitations, such as in this research, such as the fact that it's a little sample, and that we use both the qualitative method mostly, but we could also have been using a quantitative approach. For future research, we recommend to take into account other levels or agents of the teaching learning process, and also take into consideration psychological and physical impact on teaching languages. These are the references. and thank you so much.